The Smithsonian Faculty Fellowship Program represents a rewarding academic professional development opportunity for faculty at Montgomery College. The fellowships are a product of a unique collaboration between Montgomery College and Smithsonian Center for Education and Museum Studies. It's the first of its kind between the Smithsonian Institution and a community college.
Connie Holly has been teaching in the American English Language program on the Rockville campus of Montgomery College since 1997, the last 6 years as a full-time professor. Her focus is the higher levels of the English language composition track. She received a BA from Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas, and her Master's of Education at the University of Texas at Austin. She has also done graduate work in TESOL, Linguistics and Composition at North Texas State University in Denton, Texas, and Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado. A lifelong teacher, Connie has taught in a variety of settings, but has always felt that her personal philosophy of education dovetails best with the mission of the community college. She believes that she is in the business of changing lives, and that the best teaching is done when the teacher is passionate about the course. Connie is grateful for the chance to participate in the 2012 Smithsonian Fellowship as another way to renew her passion for teaching.
Well, a small but strong group. No, as Mimi just said, I am a professor in the AELP at Rockville, and I also did my Smithsonian Fellowship, like Angela, with an EL 103 class. I did it at the Museum of Natural History, at the Written in Bones exhibit. And the title of my project is No Bones About It. It's all about bones. When I started working with my students about a month before we went to visit the Smithsonian, and I showed them a video clip of Doug Owsley, who's the curator, who I'm sure you're going to see this exhibit next year. I mean, I went into this thinking it was a limited exhibit, and this was going to be the only time that we could do it, and Sandra mentioned earlier it's been extended. I'm so thrilled that we can do it again. But there's a video clip on the website, and he says, like you can read books, I can read bones. And my students really puzzled over this. They didn't know what to make of this. But we spent the next 4 weeks learning to read bones. This is at the entrance to the exhibit. It's a hologram, and there are actually 3 views of it that shows the Written in Bone. I'm sorry. Written in Bone is an exhibit that uses forensic anthropology to examine artifacts and skeletons from the Colonial Chesapeake. So my students are ESL students at a high intermediate level. And so they learned so much about American history. So this shows, depending on where you stand, it shows the man in colonial garb, the skeleton, and then at another view, which I couldn't put it up here, it shows the man in modern garb. I did this exhibit with, as part of a learning community with Karina Rock, who some of you know. She's a former fellow, and she hung out here to see this. And I picked this exhibit for several reasons. One reason was that the theme, culture, one of the established themes of our learning community is culture and society. And I thought this exhibit would fit in very well with this theme. Another reason is that it has an amazing website. The website just blew me away. And so my students were able to learn a lot about the exhibit before they went there. We had a network classroom once a week, and so we were able to do a lot of research on the website. And this is just an example, carbon isotope testing. The anthropologists could tell by examining the bones how long a person had lived in the colonies, because the English diet was wheat-based and the colonial diet was corn-based. So by examining the bones, they could see if a person was born in England, or if they were born in the Chesapeake area, or if, how long they had lived if they were born in England, if they had lived in the Jamestown area for a long time. So this was so fascinating. It was really hard science, and my students were very challenged by learning these facts. And something that was very intriguing about it is that I was learning along with them. Before I went to this exhibit, I didn't know about carbon isotope testing. And so we were learning together, and it was just fascinating. Another thing that we did on the website was the students looked at forensic case files. There were about 7 forensic case files, and students were given facts, and they had to figure out why this one, the body in the basement, why he was buried in a cellar, why he was buried in a shallow grave, why his knees were all bent up, why there was a piece of pottery thrown in there with him. And they had to come to their own conclusions about why he was buried this way. And then they looked at a proper burial, someone who was buried in a nice wooden coffin with a captain's staff. So they were able to infer certain things before we even got to the exhibit. And then when we got to the exhibit and they saw these, it was truly amazing. Also before the exhibit, by investigating on the website, students learned that you can learn to read bones. You can tell by looking at a bone how old the person was. You can tell how tall he was. You can tell if it was a man or a woman, or even if it was a person of European or African ancestry. You can also tell the things that they have done in their life. And Sandra mentioned this earlier when she talked about this exhibit and her dancing, her dancers. You can see evidence of heavy labor by examining bones. And you can even see the types of labor depending on how the bones are damaged. Students were very interested in learning about slavery in Colonial Chesapeake. And here's a facial reconstruction of a slave, and they had several reconstructions in the exhibit, which brought the colonial life to life for my students. They were able to understand the economics of slavery, and as tobacco plantations became such an important part of Jamestown's survival, and how when indentured servants came less frequently or less often to the colonies from England, we learned about how there was just a need for another type of labor to keep the plantations going. One of the assignments that my students were tasked with is they had to make personal connections. And they came up with really interesting things. This is one student who was a journalist from Argentina. And she said that being a journalist is like being an anthropologist because you're searching for truth. The anthropologist is searching for truth through evidence from past artifacts and events, and a journalist is searching for truth in present day information. But she sent this to me and it was really nice. Another connection that a couple of students made, this was also one of the forensic case files, but was this baby swaddled to death? The students didn't know about swaddling, and we learned that this was in St. Mary's City, which was the proper English settlement. It was a much different settlement, and we learned a lot about the society. But here's this proper, wealthy English.
It's not you, it's the...
Yeah, it's not me.
No,
Okay.
it's the gremlins.
It's the gremlins, yes.
She swaddled her baby so much in an effort to keep him warm that she prevented the sunlight from reaching his bones, from reaching him. And so here is his skeleton, and there's clear evidence of rickets. So my students hadn't known about rickets. They hadn't known that you could learn about a disease like this by examining bones. And this just really fascinated them. And one student said that he made this personal connection to this because he said that he was a student, and this woman was trying to make a good decision for her baby, and she didn't have the right information. And as a student, he realized he needed to get the right information so he could make the best choices for his life. I've got to read you what this student wrote. This is Captain Bartholomew Gosson. He's the one who had the proper burial in the coffin with the captain's staff. And one student wrote, "We could talk hours about Captain Bartholomew Gosson, what he did and how he died. Talking will not make me remember his importance in Jamestown. After I saw his reconstructed statue, his face, the type of clothes that he was probably wearing in 1607, his weapon, I will always remember why we talked about him." We also learned that you can learn about an individual by examining the skeleton, and that you can also learn about the society by examining a cemetery. So this part of the exhibit was called A Cemetery's Tale, and this is a map that shows in the different colors, like maybe the pink is for, 3 skeletons were in one grave, and the purple is for 2. I don't really remember. And here's a picture of the actual excavation. But one student from Ethiopia said that it just was a haunting memory for him because it brought him back to his childhood in Ethiopia when there was a cholera epidemic. And he said, families were buried together in one grave, and that, seeing this just was such a strong connection for him. The other reason that I chose this exhibit is the forensic lab. This was just a great hands-on experience, and the students really did we spent an hour in the forensic lab, and they had to crack a case, and the forensic lab was set up with 6 stations, and they had one station was about, was this bone male or female? Was it, how tall was this person? Had this person labored in life, and so forth? So they were able to reconstruct that this was an African woman. She was buried, cowrie shells were buried with her. And so that was, a lot of the students knew that cowrie shells are very common on the coast of Africa. And so that was a clear indication that she was from Africa. So they were able to exhibit that she was a slave and that she had a life of hard labor. One student wrote, "By inferring what the woman probably did in her life and who she was, really developed my interest in learning. When I listened to the scientist's explanation and read the magazine about the cowrie shells, I had fun discussing with my classmates and learned a lot of new words at the same time. If I had stayed home and read magazines by myself, things could never have been such fun as I had in the forensic lab." One of the goals of the learning community and the reading component is making inferences in reading, and it's something that's very hard for ESL students. And Karina will attest to the fact that the students did so well in the inferencing in Reading 103 because this whole month-long journey was all about inferencing and developing those kind of critical thinking skills. And you can just see how engaged they were in doing this, and we pretty much had the run of the place, and there were 2 assistants who talked to the students and sort of helped them go through the process and figure out, okay, this jawbone is smooth, what do you think that means, and so forth. And one of the technicians said this is the best class she had ever seen. They were so interested, and they knew so much, and they asked such good questions. We were really proud. So this is a book that was written by Doug Owsley and Karen Brule-Hyde, who were the curators that took us around, and it was the most fascinating afternoon of my life. It was just wonderful. They were so amazing. And so I just want to conclude by saying, as we learned to read bones, we learned about the past and learned something about who we are. And one other student wrote, "I have learned that it doesn't matter how long ago somebody died. The history of each person is still alive because anthropologists can read the skeleton bones." When we were at the exhibit, we were able to think about how the past can be related to our lives, or how the history of dead persons can help me to understand better who I am. And then as we were leaving, as Karina and I were walking over to the Metro, there were just a handful of students. We didn't arrange a group picture. We were sorry about that. But they saw us walking over to the Metro and they said, "Oh, Professor Rock, Professor Holy, come here." And so they got someone to take this picture, and it was just great. It was truly a highlight of my teaching career. And as you can see, I've been at it a while. So I want to thank everyone in the fellowship for making this possible.